Hi, I'm David Colby, CEO of Kolbe Corp, and I'm so glad you're here for the worldwide release of the new documentary, The Last Part of the Mind. It's about how Kathy Kolbe developed her theory of conation, what's now known as the Kolbe Theory. Thank you so much for being here. We at Kolbe Corp have a mission to help everybody in the world understand their conative strengths so they can apply those strengths to the things they care about most. We've been at this for almost 50 years now. Our 50th anniversary is coming up in October of 2025. And we're so glad that you are here to be part of that mission to help people achieve the things they care about most. We really want this to be an interactive experience, so feel free to chat below. If you've taken your Kolbe A index already and know your results, put those in so that the people watching can see who's there and see the different MOs of people around the world. We've made a number of resources available for you on the website, so please go there, download the conversation guide that'll help you have a discussion with other people about what conation is and how they can use it in their lives. And before I go and let you see the documentary, I also really want to thank the people at Riff Creative Studios, especially Jake Hendricks, who's the director of the documentary. They did an amazing job bringing Kathy's story and the story of conation to life. So with that, thank you for being here. Don't forget the resources. Please chat as we go, and welcome to The Last Part of the Mind.
How do you measure things like heart and drive and spirit and soul? ABC Steak Chef has found someone in Phoenix, Arizona, who thinks she knows the answer.
Kathy Kolbe of Kolbe Concept says people work better when they work in a way that's natural. The Kolbe Conative Index has turned an old adage, trust your instincts, into cutting-edge workplace strategy.
It's always trying to figure out what made people tick. What made really nice people sometimes get angry, or what made smart people do dumb things. I just was always curious about what motivated people, what made them turn on a dime and do something you didn't expect. And yet, always there was something predictable about people. That I knew my dad's friends would come over and play poker, and I would watch how they played their hands. I love poker. And I could see that they were so consistent in the way they played their hands. And didn't they know that gave them away?
What is conation? It sounds familiar, but it isn't. It is defined in a book called The 1,000 Most Obscure Words in the English Language as the area of one's mentality that has to do with desire, volition, and striving.
The conative is the part of the mind through which you act. It's your striving mechanism. So it's what you'll do as opposed to how smart you are, which is measured in an IQ test. Or how nice you are, the introvert-extrovert issues, the personality.
Is it how I approach things?
How you approach things, it's how you get things done. It's your action, your interaction, and your reaction to things.
When you try to be you and it doesn't fit somebody's idea of what you're supposed to be like or what you're supposed to do, then you have an immediate conflict between somebody's reality and what the desire is of another. At the heart of most of the problems, economic, social, emotional, at the heart of most of the problems that I know about, read about, talk about, is a misunderstanding of who you are, who I am, and how we need each other.
Her father, E.F. Wunderlich, was doing a fabulous job in the 1950s, 60s of creating an assessment to help us figure out who was really smarter than others, for lack of a better way to put that together. And the U.S. government was his biggest client. So he was working with the military to help decide who would remain a foot soldier and who would move up through the ranks. And Kathy worked in that business, learned a lot about assessment development, which is complicated, and figuring out how testing how testing would be most effective. She has great stories about sitting down and hand scoring assessments, once upon a time.
I was in the basement and I was doing fence posting, which is to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it looks like a little fence. What I was doing was going through the answers people gave on the Wonderlic personnel test. So he actually created the whole notion of personnel testing. He was the first one to ever do it.
As she saw who would score best on the Wonderlic in the people that she knew that there was something else to this performance indicator. That I think we all know someone who's really smart, who doesn't get a lot done, as she would say, or who isn't as productive as maybe they could be. So she knew that there was just one piece of the puzzle. And so she would challenge her dad and say, hey, I know there's more to this than what we're seeing. And he said, this is my life's work. It's about cognitive testing. I challenge you to see what else there is. And she took that on.
From the time I was in middle school, I had this yellow pad. My dad always had them, and so I thought it was neat. And then I would get on the bus, and I had this yellow pad, and I would draw these 4 columns, and I would start putting kids' names in the 4 columns because I would see them in these different modes. And I would also then start putting words in for these 4 modes. So from the time I was 12, 13 years old, I was aware that there were these different ways that people take action. And I knew it had nothing to do with how smart they were, because I knew a lot of smart kids that were gifted programs. And I knew who was in these programs, but I knew some of these gifted kids couldn't do the woodworking stuff, couldn't do the building, couldn't do the hands-on stuff. I also knew that there were kids who had a great gift of gab and could make up stuff and be funny as heck and could ad-lib, but they couldn't read a script. Every night at dinner, our family would go around the dinner table and, what did you do today? And it got to the point where I started talking about what I learned on the bus that day. And so my dad would egg me on with that. The more I was confronted with all these people thinking it was so great to know their Wonderlic score, the more ashamed I was. Ashamed. Because I didn't think it was right. I didn't think it was fair. And I decided, as a journalism major in my sophomore year in college, I have to fix this. I can't stand that it's my name that is being used to help all these kids who think they're getting good advice on careers and stuff and think that one's smarter than I have to fix this. I felt guilt. I felt some real guilt.
Is the Kolbe test a response to the Wonderlic test?
Yeah. Because I live in a condo and I'm up high and I don't have a yard, I brought my yard art into the condo. Now, it's true that outside it'd be fun when all these things moved, but I like to just come in and twirl it. When I'm talking on the phone, sometimes I say, oh, and this other idea, and oh yeah, well, such a... It's just fun. I like the color and I like the movement.
Why has conation kind of been ignored over years? Because it really, Plato and Aristotle, ancient philosophers have talked about these 3 dimensions. So it's kind of long been agreed that they're there.
So there are tests for cognition like the Wonderlic personnel test, the IQ test. There are tests for the affect like the Myers-Briggs or the DISC. And then there's the only one validated measure of conation, which is the Colby index result.
The Kolbe Conative Index measures the conative part of the mind, which you've never heard of before. No one has, but it is in the dictionary.
Cognitive testing was really easy and, kind of came first. And there was a lot of early work where we need to understand people's knowledge. And I think that was really critical once people didn't have to focus so much on physical strength. It's what kind of problems can you solve in your head? And then personality testing came along. And especially employers needed a way to understand more about people and how they got things done. The problem is that really pigeonholes you sometimes and is not as predictive of how you'll get things done.
While I was at Brandeis University, I took introductory psychology from Abraham Maslow, but I also took constitutional law from Henry Levy. I kept trying to make the bridge between the hierarchy of needs with Abraham Maslow to the motivation of the founding fathers with Henry Levy's course on constitutional law. There's no bridge between those two legs of the stool.
Quite honestly, conation was not a word that I knew. And most people that, find out what their Colby is, they don't know what conation is either, but they know what it means.
When you go into the world of academia, if you ended up talking about psychology and your feelings and values, it was easier to relate to. You knew of it. To ask the question, what's someone's desire or will, no one ever figured out how to actually measure that, and Kathy did.
There is a missing leg that gives color and substance and tangibility to what's going on. And I realized there was another piece of it that wasn't being talked about. And she was tapping all the right notes.
There's really not been someone that took the conative part of the mind and assessed that. And Kathy was the natural person to do that.
Until Kathy developed the Colby Index, there was no way to measure this.
There's no better example of somebody who has just doggedly refused to let anybody put her into a box that doesn't fit who she is. It's Kathy. She will not let someone push her in a position where she can't be who she is.
We can teach you the skills, but we can't change your instincts.
When you're not accepted for who you are, when you're criticized for you being you and doing things your own way, that is a complete disregard and disrespect for humanity, for you as a person. That hurts more than physical pain. Oh, we do it in there. It's very colorful.
Go in. You can give us a tour.
Well, this is a Kathy Colby room. I mean, come on in. Every bit of this is my creativity. You probably, these are books I've written, but probably more proud than of the books. Oh, you got to see this. This is one of the greatest things I ever created. See, it's got little feet in it, and it's got I can have a little kid, 2 years old, play with this, and I can tell you their MO. This is, people say, what are you most proud of? It's probably this bag of junk, because when you let little kids play with it and give them the freedom, they show you who they are. I just love it. Kids around the globe have played with this stuff. I watch the video, and I can tell the parents, you know what your kid needs? The freedom to do this, or pause when they do that, or cheer them on when they, because this is the truth. The books are okay. They weren't so much fun to do, though. If I had a choice, I'd just play with all the colors, and I would, oh, well, I do it. I don't have to say I would, I do.
Kathy's early work was with kids. And so as she was watching children who were coming to her summer camps and solving problems, if she did not tell them how to get things done, so she would maybe put a pile of stuff on the ground and say, here you go, this is the end result that I want. But let them have complete freedom to get there any way they wanted. She started seeing this natural pattern to how they would start, how they would initiate problem solving. And so that's when she really tapped in and said, I think I'm seeing something here. This is not about intelligence. This is not about personality type, or if you're motivated to do it. There really is this way that you start problem solving.
I started program for kids in the summer that I called SPIES, Summer Program for Individual Explorations. And the whole thing was to explore the strength in each kid, the way they learned, what they did best, how they could achieve. That program was the beginning of Conation, because I saw kids thrive by having the freedom to make their own decisions and do things their own way, and they would consistently go back to that way of doing things. I kept telling parents things they didn't know about their kids, and they would start to ask me, can you explain to me how you know this? And I said, some of it I can. And so I tried to figure it out, and I started doing daytime I'm with the kids doing explorations of activities that work for them. And then night times and weekends, I was doing seminars for parents, and then teachers, local teachers wanted to know. And then teachers started coming from around the country for these seminars. I don't even have a degree in education. And I have teachers and principals and superintendents coming to hear about these seminars I'm teaching and how kids learn. I reached out to educational publishing companies across America and said, would you be interested in resources that are appropriate for creative effort with kids and for gifted kids? And they said, well, maybe a little creative this and that. We do so. But gifted, I mean, there aren't that many gifted people. It's not a big enough audience. I did not start resources for the gifted publishing company because I wanted to. It's because I had to. Because nobody else was meeting the needs of gifted kids. No schools had materials for gifted students. I mean, it was so sad. But then Time magazine decides I'm really weird because they somehow figure out I'm dyslexic and I have all these, I'm ADD, I'm dyslexic, I'm this person with all these problems. And yet I have a company, Resources for the Gifted. How does she do this? And they became very intrigued by my story. And they put me in the Man of the Year article. The can-do people was what the header was. Well, when Time magazine called my office and they said, Time's on the phone for you, Kathy, I said, tell them I already subscribe. It never occurred to me they wanted to interview me. But they had me go to California and be interviewed there, and it was really fun. Just so much fun. And I thought, maybe some of this work I'm doing could go bigger. Maybe I could be more than just kind of a local weirdo doing these things. And I started thinking seriously of how could I take this big and what could I do? And as soon as I did that, I got people who wanted to buy the company. I can't tell you how many people have tried to buy out different stages of my business development. But I got acquainted with interesting people. I got to do interesting things. I got more and more leadership roles in the community and in government. Everything was going so wonderfully. My kids were succeeding in college. It was just the best of the best. And I was single parenting during this period of time. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, when I'm coming home from dinner with my kids, this car, half a mile from home, the closest stoplight there, just rams into the back of us. And I felt my bones crunch.
Turns out it was a drunk driver who hit us from behind on a major road here in Phoenix, and so he was going 50-something miles an hour, and my mom and her friend were in the back seat and just heard them. They clearly were hurt. The back tire of the car was pushed up basically to the front door, so that door where she was, there was just kind of no getting her out on that side. Took her down to the hospital. Turns out she broke her pelvis, not just her hip, but her pelvis on both sides because she got shoved into the seat in front of her. So her knees jammed up and broke them.
In the hospital, the only thing I could think of that really worried me, because I knew my kids would be okay, where is that book? And it was this book. It was his paperback Roget's Thesaurus. And I said, I saw something in that book, and I need to know more about it. And I can't die until I know more about it, because I'm meant to do something with this. And the doctors said, don't worry, Kathy, don't worry. Let's just worry about getting you better. There was no certainty I'd live. let's just get you through this. And I kept saying, get me that book, give me that book. And nobody knew what book I was talking about. I know that there was something in that book that I had to stay alive and I had to be okay because of it. And it has to do with willpower. And when the doctor asked me, why are you working so hard to get better? Because I had so many broken things, and yet I was trying to walk. I said, what are you talking about? I have work to do. What is the work you have to do? And it was in this book that I had, and it was a word I couldn't remember, but I knew I had found. It was the most peculiar kind of thing. I was working at walking and learning to think and learning to be in order to find a word I didn't know. That word, in this version of the thesaurus, under 600 is the word will. Under will, it's will, volition, conation. Freedom, well, I talk about freedom all the time. Purpose, well, I talk about purposefulness all the time. The mind, the frame of mind. Okay, I'm done worrying about whether I'm going to live or meant to live. Done. I got my future. And I'll be fine. And it was. This is the hat that got me moving. They had told me not to move in the hospital after I was so badly injured from a car accident. And this would be in the 1980s, the mid-1980s, 1985 or 6 at the time I'm wearing this. And I'm trying to learn to walk. And my friend who was trying to help me bought me this and said, okay, and I also had a baton thing. And she said, I want you to move the baton up and down with your arm, and I want you to march. And we're going to put on, the recording, little hand recorder, a Sousa march. Da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. The hat was always falling off, and I never liked to do this. So that's what helped me recover, was moving in silly ways with a silly hat around the neighborhood. And little did I know, I found out like 2 or 3 years later, some of the neighbors were watching out their living room windows. I always marched in the morning, and they said they knew my schedule. And they would gather and look out the windows at Kathy marching. And they would cheer me on when I marched faster and took higher steps. At first I shuffled, because that's all I could do. But when I got to where I could do a real march, it was such a sense of accomplishment. It was like, I can do this. I'm going to be okay. I'm not sure this is proof I'm okay, but I'm walking.
She was coming up like a rocket out of total devastation where she could not even read anything on a page.
My life is meant to help people understand their strengths. And that's not cognitive. And it's not just my ego talking. It's this other thing. I was probably home from the hospital for less than a week before I made the decision, this thing called conation is what I have to do. And I started messing around, just trying different questions for a questionnaire. It was going to be the Kolbe test. It was going to be the conative. I called it the if I ever figure out what I'm measuring. I knew it was conation, but I didn't know how to measure it. So I have all these, they're in my files, all these versions of the if. And I said, the if is impact factors. There are impact factors in our brain that decide who we really are. But it's this thing, if I ever figure this out, and it was kind of my personal nagging at myself, if you're really serious, Kathy, you'll figure it out. And I started writing different versions of what's now the Kolbe Index within a month of getting home from the hospital. And I started testing people.
There was definitely a change in the business. The business before then had focused on educational material, games, books, kits. Afterward, she really left the educational publishing behind, and it didn't go away entirely, but she stopped putting much energy into that and really focused her energy on developing the conative part of the business, the helping people understand their conative strengths.
I started working with a lot of CEOs who neither understood themselves nor were understood by others. I help so many businesses thrive and people survive. And I started thinking, this is like a secret sauce. I can't just be the only person who knows. I felt guilty. I know things nobody else knows. This isn't right. People need to know this. So I did my very first seminar by asking people who I'd gone to their businesses and they'd seen what I'd done for them and for their direct reports. I said, I'm going to do a seminar in Phoenix for people who want to learn what it is I'm doing. And I can't even describe it for you ahead of time, except you saw me do it in your company. I am developing ways of measuring this where I can put it together, and it now has a name. It's the conative part of the mind. So I'm calling it the Kolbe Conative Index.
Kathy Kolbe of Kolbe Concept says people work better when they work in a way that's natural.
Fascinating to me how my credibility grew because I help businesses thrive.
The client list ranges from Kodak to Macy's to the Phoenix Suns.
Alaska Air was having some issues. The CEO was concerned whether he'd stay in the role. I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I saved his career. He would have had a wonderful other career, but he figured out how to work with a board that didn't understand his quick start.
Kathy Kolbe is a crusader. She believes in the power of instinctive behavior. Her mission, convincing business leaders that identifying and encouraging instinctive action is key to improving productivity. Kolbe calls instinct an untapped business resource.
So I've helped golfers improve their game. We've worked with the NFL, the NBA. We were working with Jerry Colangelo of the Phoenix Suns. And I was so involved in trying to help him, and he got so excited about our work and saw the truth of it with the players they were recruiting, and all this stuff was just looking so great.
What she brought to the table was two things that we could never do. We can't make an incision in the forehead, and we can't make an incision over the heart to really see what's inside that person.
Jerry wanted me to help him with some other recruits that were coming up. And one of them wasn't available during the regular season and the regular time, and it ended up being, as this guy was flying, I think he was coming back from Europe. He was in the Olympics team, and he was flying back, and we were asked to give this guy the Colby when he was at the airport.
I was kind of nervous taking it because I didn't know if I was giving her the right answer or the wrong answer, but I think everything worked out.
There are no right answers. Colby's test simply shows whether a person is primarily one of four types: a quick start, who is a risk taker, a fact finder, who plays the percentages, a follow-through, who sticks to the game plan, or an implementer, who is instinctive and physical.
My husband read him the questions. And the next day, Dan Marley became a Phoenix Sun.
When Dan Marley of the Phoenix Suns hurtles through the air and slam dunks, one fan may cheer a little louder than most. Her name is Kathy Kolbe, and she is cheering for Marley's jam and her own judgment. 2 years ago, she advised the Suns to draft the little-known Marley.
When we recommend Marley, we didn't just recommend Marley. We said, take him, take him, take him.
His scores were exactly what they needed, and we kept saying, take him, take him, take him.
She'd never seen Dan Marley play, had no idea if he was left-handed, right-handed, tall or short, or anything about him, but she evaluated his test and said, this guy has heart, and he'll be a great player if he has any skill at all. And he's been exactly what she said he would be, the toughest guy on the floor every night he goes out there.
The whole key to team building is to find people with the right conative mix so that they create a synergy between them.
It was just so much fun because we were live, real time, telling him by phone, take Dan Marley. He's got the right MO for this team. We need him. And he surely was what we needed. He was so much fun to watch.
2 years ago, the Suns were one of the worst teams in the NBA. Now, they are one of the best. Clearly, Kathy Kolbe has given them a hand. Dick Schaap, ABC News, Phoenix.
I'd gotten to know Jerry Colangelo and really admire him. Well, he offered me a partnership. He offered me the opportunity to buy in and be an owner in the Phoenix Suns. And I decided as an entrepreneur, I couldn't do something like that because my work needed all the resources I could give to it to make it long-standing. So then, when I didn't buy into it, he tried to buy Colby Corp. He's one of many people who tried to buy Colby Corp.
I, in the mid to late 90s, worked for a large payroll company here in America. And we had a strategy at the company to build an organization that was a one-stop shopping area for HR. And the only piece of the puzzle we were missing was an assessment instrument. We found Colby. We set up a meeting, myself and several of my colleagues and the CEO of the company, to come down, and we spent 2 days with Kathy and her team, and she took us through one day of Colby. It was the first time in my life that I had someone who had never met me sit across the table from me and tell me exactly who I was. Not only did she talk to me about who I was, but she talked about who my colleagues were, and even the colleagues, we had 2 of them who just refused to accept it. All the other colleagues around the table are going like, oh yeah, that's you. So once we became enamored with the instrument and started looking at the practical applications and usage, we decided we wanted to buy the company. And we thought we had, and I think Kathy got a little cold feet on us and decided not to sell it. But she and I remained friends, and she said to me at some point down the road later, after the deal was done and the hurt feelings and everything was over, that if I ever wanted to come work for the organization, she'd love to have me come back. And that's exactly what I did, probably 15, 20 years later.
It's just never been about money, and I have never trusted my work with anybody but my kids and the people who we've taught at Colby Corp. I totally trust the people who work at Colby Corp. I've had people who wanted my algorithms so they could find out what makes kids tick, so that they could find out what they would buy, so they could upsell merchandise. Now, that is not why I was born, to help you be richer over what shoes you sell or what this or that or the other.
Kathy, at the time that she started this business, was way ahead of her time, particularly in the area of gender.
I was one of 2 women business owners in the state. My husband had to give signed permission for me to own a business. It was just unheard of that a woman would be a business owner. But it was okay as long as I was doing stuff for the kids. It's when I got involved in leadership programs, and I was part of what they called Phoenix 40. It was supposed to be the top 40 business leaders in town. And guess what? They were all male.
You take a woman in the 70s who is pushing the boundaries as it relates to 3 parts of the brain. And she was asking and almost demanding like this to be paid attention to. But she's a woman in the 70s. And the only way she could figure it out is to try to go through the business world, because the world of academia was full of males in a very traditional, this is always how we've done it type of mindset. And then only to run into the business world in which, again, extremely male dominant, framework and the traditions. Some people were up for it, some people were interested, and that's where she kind of started to get her hook, in the fact that people were giving her the opportunity.
She did something that a lot of women just either were not interested in doing or didn't feel they could do it. And just none of those things were roadblocks for her. So she's always been a trailblazer, and I think that's another thing that would be a legacy for her, is that there was no wall that she felt she could not go through.
For me, that experience of getting my Colby A index was so liberating. It was like, wow, this is who I am. I am supposed to change things. And it was like being unlocked. Like you've been in this self-imposed cage, but someone's thrown open the door and this whole new world of possibilities showed up.
I think Colby really helped me to understand what were those innate strengths that drove me to do things in a particular way.
I took my Kolbe questionnaire when I was in between jobs in 1994. And what I found was it explained so much about how I had always been, but had never had the language for it.
I spent 17 years trying to reach a business goal. And when I finally did, my 5-year-old daughter, Kelly, asked me for an appointment to take her to the park. And when we got there, she asked me why I didn't love her.
There really wasn't a whole lot of time that we spent together as a family.
I got some coaching, and the very first thing that we did with that coaching is took my Kolbe assessment. I learned a lot more about myself, operated a lot more freely.
He really figured out how to play to his strengths and use those not only for his own good, but to build a team around him.
Conation isn't something that Kathy invented, but the Kolbe A Index is the assessment that she developed in order for us to take a look at those striving instincts. And so she developed the Kolbe A Index, which is a 36-question assessment that people can take in order to find out what their instinctive strengths are. So in the simplest terms, conation is a part of the mind. So we start with the 3 parts of the mind framework that Aristotle and Plato wrote about. It's something that's long been established, the thinking, the feeling, and the doing, or more formally called the cognitive, the affective, and the conative.
And this concept goes back literally thousands of years to the ancient Greek philosophers. Well, the thinking and feeling parts are a little more, well, we've talked about them more. Certainly we've learned about them, we've talked about them, we've discussed them, certainly in modern times. You know, the thinking, how smart you are. You go to school to learn stuff so that you can do it well. You learn math, you learn writing, you learn history, whatever else. That's the cognitive part.
The affect being about personality, motivation, what are your values, kind of what you want to do.
We all know the language of extrovert and introvert, or, you know, whether you're likable, agreeable, or disagreeable.
Third part of the mind is the conative part of the mind. So conation is about the doing, and it is about the fact that everyone has these striving instincts or a way that you most naturally take action. And it is innate to you, it is unchanging, so it's this kind of missing piece of how people get things done.
This conative part of the mind, this pattern in the way we take action, I think sometimes it's harder to observe, it's harder to isolate, is a better way to put it maybe. Because look, when we operate, we're using all of who we are, not just our mind, we're using our body, we're using all kinds of things.
So we have an assessment called the Kolbe A Index. That's kind of our flagship assessment. It's 36 questions, and it's going to ask you what would you most likely do and least likely do if free to be yourself.
The key thing about conation is there are 4 what we call action modes that, you know, it's fact finder, follow through, quick start, and implementer.
Start with fact finder. Fact finder is how you gather and how you share information. And it is on a continuum of someone who is very specific. We'll start with details, we'll research, we'll certainly dig in depth or look historically before they take action, all the way up to someone on the other end of the continuum who will naturally simplify. They're going to bottom line. They're going to absolutely look for ways to condense data and consolidate. So we really say that that strength is to simplify. And then, of course, within that continuum, there's something in between. So people that will edit data or, you know, use information that has already been gathered to solve problems. With follow-through is, again, how we organize and design. So this is someone who on one end of the continuum will very naturally focus on a traditional system. So these are our people that will finish one thing before they start another. They will create a plan. This is someone who is excellent with timelines and making sure that we are checking off all the boxes before we move on. So procedures and processes come very naturally to people like that. The other end of the continuum are the people that we really need to be adaptable, because sometimes the plan doesn't work. So when things don't go according to plan, we need someone who's going to adapt and vary the approach. Quick start is how we deal with risk and uncertainty. So Risk and uncertainty on one end of the continuum is someone who's just going to jump in. They're going to experiment. They are going to brainstorm. They might ask the question, what hasn't been done before? So it's about pushing for variety and having choices. Other end of the continuum is someone who is going to prevent chaos. So the other end of the continuum we really need to make sure that we aren't taking too many risks. They're the ones that are the stabilizers. So they will naturally say, why are we changing what's working? And they will make sure that we are not just changing for the sake of change. And implementer is how you handle space and tangibles. So think of it as a continuum from concrete to abstract. On one end of the continuum, this is someone who's actually going to build a solution, use handcrafted models, operate in a hands-on way, really focused on quality solutions and building something to last. Other end of the continuum, someone who's going to imagine a solution. So they will deal in the abstract and intangible kinds of notions.
Again, only 3 parts of the mind. If we only understand 2 of those 3, and there's a third of the human mind that we don't really get. No one teaches us what our strengths are in that area or teaches us how to use them to their fullest. It just makes life more of a grind than it needs to be.
There is this nature that you have that if no one imposed a way of getting things done on you, it's how you would get things done. So that Kolbe index is where you're self-reporting what would you most likely and least likely do, and then we give you a result that basically shares all of your instinctive strengths.
I have been seeking truth. And I have been seeking to understand how that truth can be explained and understood and used to help us have better lives. And I'm not interested in somebody's truth that has no purpose other than to make them money. It's appalling that our educational system has denied the truth of conation. It's appalling for the teachers who are trying to teach everybody to learn in the same way and not even have the freedom to use their own innate abilities, let alone to try to figure out how to accommodate the needs of their students. One size does not fit all.
Because in a lot of education, it is about, can I learn facts and can I spit them back? But when that's the only way we judge whether a student is successful in school, it's just saying some of you are not going to be successful, and that's just not true.
In education, there's been a long history of focusing so much on skills and knowledge and intelligence that we're missing the mindset that there's this other thing about you that is a strength that if you capitalize on, learning will be better.
They are told that they're not focused, right? They are daydreaming or they're on to the next thing before the rest of the class, and so they tend to get labeled as ADD.
What we get in the world of academia is a very rigid, you need to know this is the knowledge that we're expecting you to have, and we want you to regurgitate it. And a lot of students don't make it in that.
There is a really interesting story about a colleague of mine. She wanted to get her doctorate at a university in the state of Kansas. And she went to the university with the idea that, can I do my dissertation? Can I do my research? Can I do my study on conation? I mean, she wanted to put her stamp on it with her dissertation to get her doctorate because of it. And she was told no. And she wasn't told no because they didn't like the topic. It was that when you work on your dissertation and when you have your committee, you have to have people on your committee that know the subject. Nobody at this particular institution knew the topic of conation.
I read history extensively. I pay very much attention to world affairs. Understanding how diplomats, presidents, heads of state, charismatic leaders attack the problems set before them. It's how history is made, why history is made, why it goes one way instead of the other. And Kathy's theory made extraordinary sense to me, and I was stunned that there was no one else that seemed to be working in this area.
You need a job that uses the abilities that are innate to you, that are natural for you. But our schools don't help us do that. There's no school program, there's no program anywhere, not government, not anywhere, that helps build on the conative truth inside us. This is who we are. These are the kinds of jobs we'll succeed at. One of the feelings I always had about school was you only get credit for mimicking the answer they told you was right. So the people who could remember the answer got credit.
That's all we've known in our public school systems for years, is facts, following rules. And so that's what's been recognized as being successful. What are we missing? Students not being able to naturally problem solve in the classroom.
I had a student came to me in his sophomore year, had struggled in school, bright kid. The only place he was experiencing success was at maker fairs. As a 10-year-old, he ended up going to the White House and meeting Barack Obama with a marshmallow gun that he had built. He was a kid who built stuff. One day I said, what is it about makerspace or these maker fairs that really speak to you? Why is your energy always there, and why aren't you putting more energy here in school and stuff? And he said, all my life I've tried to find my people. Those are my people. Not here. And he's talking about teachers, and he's talking about other kids who are successful when he's not. Because we make him sit in a chair all day long, and we make him think always in the abstract. And we don't talk to him about what the practical applications are of anything he's learning. And we don't give him an experience of just exploring things in a physical, hands-on way. If we do, it's rare. He's as smart as any other kid I ever met. Schools are filled with people who really care about kids. They want to do what's right. They want to help kids. And here's a tool that so far hasn't really found its way there. And it is such a simple thing. And it would take away so much pain that kids have experienced in their lives. I don't get it. I don't know why we don't use it.
You know, the big problem when you don't understand conation, if you don't understand what's making a person tick, you can think, oh, they're being lazy, or they're just playing dumb, or they just don't want to do it, or they're just acting out. Yeah, they're acting out being who they are. When you try to be you and it doesn't fit somebody's idea of what you're supposed to be like or what you're supposed to do, then you have an immediate conflict between somebody's reality and what the desire is of another.
I could never figure out why I seemed to do things differently than other people, where I didn't fit in the mold as some other people did. And I got back my results, and all of a sudden it was this incredible validation. It was like, oh my gosh, this explains me to me. And it was revelationary. So I know when to place myself. And knowing that is incredibly validating. It just gives me so much confidence.
I grew up in a large family, and I was always the outlier in that family. Fast forward many years to 2004 when I first learned about the Kolbe Index, and what an epiphany. It was this huge discovery that now I could put words to the uniqueness that I brought to the table. Learning that instead of being the outlier, but that I was bringing a special gift to the table was so liberating. It was an exceptional moment in my life, actually.
It's just one of the most gratifying things I've ever done, to be able to help people have the freedom to be themselves. If everybody could feel free to just be themselves, what a better, happier place we'd be.
If my work is worth anything, it's its ability to save lives. I've had young people tell me that they were thinking about suicide. Parents have told me, kids have told me. I didn't think, or they didn't feel, worthy. When they came up against problems, when they had peers, the other kids say nasty things to them, it crushed them. When kids say I'm crushed, I worry about that word. I worry about them saying I don't have any reason to live. We all need a reason to live. We all need a reason to get up this morning. That's called purpose. My whole point here is my work is about helping people help each other. Help yourself first always. It's that thing like getting on the plane and you got to get the air for you first. You got to be okay first. But then pass that on. If we all passed it on, if we all knew our Kolbe results and could say, I'm good at this, what are you good at? Oh, I see your result. You're good at this. I want you to help me do this, or I know someone who needs you. Talk about your natural abilities, your conative strengths, not what you wish you could do, what you can do, what you will do, not how smart you are. The dumbest conversations we have are about how smart people are. And the smartest conversations we have is how we're going to use the abilities we have purposefully.
Thanks for being here for the worldwide release of the new documentary, The Last Part of the Mind. I really hope you enjoyed it. I also really hope you will discover your conative strengths if you haven't already. So you can go to Kolbe.com to take your Kolbe A index and get those results. I'd also encourage you to work with somebody. It can be us here at Colby Corp or one of our independent Kolbe certified consultants. On Kolbe.com, there's a list of those consultants, and it's a really useful way to get more out of it and understand at a deeper level, not just your results, but how you can apply those results to the things you're doing in the world. So thanks for being here. Please share your results with people, share your strengths with people, and I hope you'll share this documentary with other people, with your friends, your colleagues, your family. Again, thanks for being here.